Ever get that feeling? Like, you know someone's watching you online. It's one thing when you see those targeted ads and you're like, okay, little creepy, but whatever. But this paper, this one takes creepy to a whole new level. Seriously.
Yeah, you're not kidding. I mean, the title alone, Are We the New Digital Soylent Green, kind of says it all.
Seriously, intense, right?
Definitely.
So we're diving into how we're practically handing over our digital selves, like piece by piece. And the scary part is we might not even realize it's happening.
Right. It's not just about, what you're posting or sharing on purpose. This paper gets into the sneaky ways they're gathering data, often without us even knowing.
Okay, so like what are we talking about here?
Well, think about something as simple as opening an email. You wouldn't think twice, right?
No, not at all.
But the paper talks about how even that can expose your information.
Wait, seriously? Just from opening an email? How?
Yeah, it's kind of wild. A lot of emails have these things called tracking pixels. They're basically like digital booby traps.
Yeah.
You open the email and bam, they know.
Yeah.
They bing. The sender, they can track when you open it, where you were, even the kind of device you're using.
So it's like they're digitally peeking over your shoulder, basically. Okay, yeah, that's unsettling. But still, it's just one email, right?
That's the thing, though. It's not just emails. Think about all the photos we post online without a second thought.
Oh, man. Yep, true.
This paper breaks down how someone could, in theory, use a single picture to figure out your age, where you live, even details about your life.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I've heard about facial recognition software and all that, but...
It goes deeper than that.
Uh-huh.
There's this technology, point cloud imaging, right?
Yeah.
You can actually use photos to create 3D models.
Whoa!
So imagine someone recreating your living room just from a photo you posted online. Suddenly, your online presence has very real-world consequences.
Okay, that's straight out of a sci-fi thriller.
Right. And here's where it gets even more interesting. All this data, the emails, the photos, everything we do online, it all becomes fuel for AI. And we're practically serving ourselves up as data points for these algorithms to analyze.
So we're feeding the machine without even knowing it.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's like we're walking data mines just waiting to be tapped, which
Right.
is a little unnerving, to say the least. But this paper, it goes even further, right? It brings up these DNA testing kits that have become super popular. Turns out all that genetic data, it might have uses that go way beyond just tracing your family tree.
Yeah, and that's where things get really interesting. The paper highlights how that data, even though it seems totally unrelated to like your online activity, could be used in other ways. And it connects to something we've all been thinking about lately.
You mean with the pandemic?
Exactly. The paper draws this parallel between those DNA kits and the whole contact tracing app thing that was everywhere a while back. Think about it. For a while there, we were practically encouraged to share all our health information, where we were going, everything, all in the name of public safety.
And a lot of people did because, I mean, things were pretty scary back then.
Right, and it's completely understandable. But this paper, it asks this really important question. Did that fear, even though it was totally valid at the time, did it lead us down a dangerous path when it comes to data privacy? Do we give up too much? And maybe even more importantly, what's happening to all that data now?
Because it's not like they can just hit delete, right? Once it's out there, it's out there.
Exactly. The paper argues that even with the best intentions, even if it's for public safety, that data could end up being used in ways we never agreed to. And it's not just governments we're talking about here. Companies could get their hands on that data too. So suddenly, your health information, your movements during a global crisis, it all becomes part of this digital profile that's out there.
Okay, yeah. That's definitely a little unsettling to think about. So we've got all this data floating around, and on top of that, we're relying more and more on algorithms to try to make sense of it all. But this paper argues that those algorithms, they're not exactly perfect, are they?
That's right. We tend to think of AI as this totally objective force, like it's just pure math, so it has to be unbiased. But the reality is AI can be just as flawed and biased as the humans who create it.
The paper gives this example that really blew my mind. Imagine you're trying to teach an AI how to do math. Sounds pretty basic, right?
Right.
But what if the data you're using to teach it, what if it's even a little bit off?
It's like that saying, garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
The paper actually uses the example of an AI that learned that 2 + 2 = 5.
Wait, seriously, how is that even possible?
Because the data it was trained on used all these decimals that, when you round them, made that crazy equation seem true.
Wow. Okay, so that's kind of terrifying when you think about it.
It is, especially when you start to think about the real-world implications. Imagine an AI system that's screening job applicants. If the data it learned from is biased, it could unintentionally discriminate against certain candidates.
Or what about loan applications?
Exactly. A flawed algorithm could unfairly deny someone a loan just because of some hidden bias in the data.
And the scariest part is we might not even realize it's happening. How can you even question an algorithm's decision if you don't understand how it works?
It's a huge problem. And honestly, it's something we all need to be thinking about. Like right now, this isn't some far-off sci-fi problem. It's happening as we speak.
So what are we supposed to do? Should we all just ditch our phones, move off the grid, become like digital hermits?
Well, hey, if that's your thing, more power to you.
Yeah.
But for those of us who aren't quite ready to go full digital detox, I think the solution starts with awareness.
Where?
Exactly. We need to be way more discerning about the information we consume, both online and offline. We can't just blindly trust everything we see on social media or take those algorithmic recommendations at face value.
So like fact-checking our news feeds, being aware of those targeted ads.
Absolutely. We have to remember that these algorithms, they're not neutral. They're created by humans with all their biases and flaws, and those biases can get baked into the data itself.
Is it starting to feel a little like we're living that dystopian movie this paper is named after? Like we're losing control and our digital selves are being harvested for some unknown purpose?
Yeah, it's a valid concern for sure. And the paper goes even further, right? It talks about something called the first digital evolution.
Right. And this is where it really starts to feel like we've gone off the deep end.
Well, it's not about freaking out. It's about recognizing this shift that's happening. The author's point is that technology is evolving at a pace that's way faster than our ability to understand all the implications. It's like we're building the plane while we're flying it.
Okay, so they're comparing this to like actual evolution, like Darwin and all that.
Exactly. Think about how evolution works in nature. It's all about adaptation.
Right.
The species that can't adapt to change, they don't survive. This first digital evolution is kind of like that. But instead of physical traits, it's about information and how we interact with the world around us.
So it's not just that our devices are evolving, it's us too.
Exactly. We're becoming so intertwined with technology that it's getting harder and harder to separate the physical world from the digital world. And that has huge implications for everything, from how we communicate with each other to how we govern ourselves as a society.
And in this new world, in this first digital evolution, who holds the power? Because the paper talks about the shift away from the traditional gatekeepers of information.
That's one of the most fascinating aspects of this whole thing. It used to be that information was controlled by a select few governments, media companies, big institutions. But Beal, everyone with a smartphone has the potential to be a content creator, a news source, an influencer.
So it's like the Wild West of information out there.
In a way, yeah. And that means that we as individuals have a lot more responsibility than we used to. We can't just blindly trust what we see online. We have to be critical thinkers. We have to fact check. We have to be really discerning consumers of information.
It's almost like we have to level up our BS detectors, you know?
Exactly. And that's empowering in a way, but it also means we have to be more aware than ever before.
So we're not just passively handing over data, we're practically building this digital ecosystem ourselves. But the paper argues this isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? This whole first digital evolution idea.
Yeah, it's not about good or bad, really. It's more about recognizing this massive shift that's happening. The author's trying to make us think about how technology is evolving faster than we can wrap our heads around it, you know? Like we're building the plane while we're flying it, which is a little unnerving when you think about it.
Okay, and they keep comparing this to a kind of evolution, like in nature.
Right. It's a good analogy. Think about how evolution actually works. It's all about adaptation. If a species can't keep up with the changes around it, it doesn't survive, right?
Yeah.
This first digital evolution, it's kind of like that. But instead of physical traits, it's about information and how we interact with the world, how we process everything.
So it's not just that our phones and computers are evolving, it's us too.
Exactly. And here's the thing. We're becoming so intertwined with technology that it's getting harder and harder to see where one ends and the other begins. Like what's real, what's digital, it's blurring together. And that's a huge deal. It has implications for everything, from the way we communicate to how we govern ourselves, everything.
And in this new world, this first digital evolution, who holds the power? The paper talked about a shift away from traditional gatekeepers of information.
Right. And that's one of the most interesting and potentially exciting parts of this whole thing. It used to be that information was controlled by a select few governments, media companies, those big institutions. But now, practically anyone with a smartphone, even us, We have the potential to be content creators, news sources, influencers. Kind of amazing when you think about it.
So it's like the Wild West out there.
In a way, yeah,
Mm.
which is exciting. But it also means we as individuals, we have a much bigger responsibility than we might realize. We can't just passively consume information anymore.
Yeah.
We can't just trust what we see online. We have to think critically, fact-check things, be really discerning about what we believe and who we trust.
It's like we need to level up our BS detectors big time.
Exactly. Which, honestly, that's a good thing. That's empowering.
Yeah.
We're not just cogs in the machine anymore. But it requires us to be more aware, more engaged than ever before.
So where does that leave us? Like, what's the takeaway here? The big so what of this whole digital evolution thing?
Honestly, I think the biggest takeaway is this. We're not just along for the ride. We're active participants in shaping this digital future, whether we're conscious of it or not. Every click, every single piece of data we share, it all contributes to how this thing evolves.
So it's not about being afraid of technology. It's about like learning how to use it responsibly,
Mhm.
understanding the rules of the game so we can actually win.
Exactly. And the more we understand how our data is being used, the better equipped we'll be to protect ourselves, make informed choices, and hopefully steer this digital evolution in a direction that benefits humanity as a whole.
This deep dive, it's been a real eye-opener. It's like we've been handed this incredibly powerful tool, this whole digital world, but we're still figuring out how to use it responsibly, how to use it for good.
I agree. It's a lot to process, but awareness is the first step, right?
Totally. And this paper, Are We the New Digital Soylent Green? It definitely gives us a lot to think about. And that question the author asks, that simple question, would I consent to this use of my data? It can make all the difference in the world. Until next time, keep asking those tough questions and stay curious.